I flipped my pickup end over end. They think I was laying in the ditch in the cold for 4 hours before I was found.
Welcome to the Thank You Adversity podcast, where we explore the power of resilience, the beauty of growth, and the lessons learned from life's tough challenges. I'm your host, Tony Tofree, and my goal is to inspire, motivate, and provide hope for those who may be facing challenges, uncertainty, or adversity in their lives. We'll journey through inspiring stories of triumph over adversity as I interview people who can offer insights, encouragement, and practical wisdom to help you navigate through life's ups and downs. Join me as we uncover the silver linings behind every setback and discover gratitude in the face of adversity. Navigating through life's challenges can be tough, but remember, every hurdle is an opportunity for growth. Thank you, adversity. Welcome back to the Thank You Adversity podcast. Today I have a special guest here with me today whom I've had the pleasure of knowing for many years. I've had the opportunity to work closely with him, building our relationship, and I've learned so much from him and his journey as he's been kind enough to share his life's perspectives, wisdom, and insights with me, enriching both my personal and professional growth along the way. In preparation for this episode, one word continued to jump out to me about Joe, and that word was resilience. With a world-class sense of humor, intelligent, honest, and just as motivating, I want to introduce Joe Dailey to the show. Joe, welcome to the Thank You Adversity podcast.
Thanks, Tony. My pleasure.
Being one of 7 in your family, what did you want to be growing up as a kid and why?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question. I don't remember what age I was. I told Mom that I noticed people built a lot of dog houses, but nobody ever built cat houses. So I wanted to build cat houses when I grew up, not understanding what that really meant at the time. But I did want to do building. Okay. So I loved, I used to build, like playing with my trucks. And one of the greatest presents I got as a kid was I got a toy road grader for Christmas when I was 7 or 8 years old. And I would play and build roads and bridges and communities. So I kind of wanted to be an architect and a builder.
Funny how that, those little things come full circle sometimes. So one story that I remember of you telling me, what was the size of your graduating class in high school?
My graduating class, the makeup of my graduating class mirrored the makeup of my family. 4 girls and 3 boys. There were 7 of us.
I just can't get over that. That is, oh my gosh. So you were a runner, avid runner. You ran in high school, right? Did you run track?
I ran track in high school, but I did not become an avid runner in high school. So in high school in track, I would run. Well, the first time I ran the mile, I thought I was going to kill myself. But so I would do sprints and hurdles is basically what I ran. Or if there was a relay, I would do that. However, you laughed at there were 7 kids in my senior class. And my junior year of high school, I think there were 3 of us on the boys track team. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that was, from freshman through senior, there were 3 boys on the track team.
That is so crazy. I remember, I still remember you.
So we did not win any meets.
After high school, was on to college. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and your journey?
Sure. I'll kind of bridge the gap, use the bridge word a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
In high school, I had the opportunity to take a drafting course that it was called Career Center, and it was in the bigger city in South Dakota. So we would be bused to Watertown, where you could take various vocational classes. And I was able to take a drafting course where we would be able to go in and design houses, etc. And so after high school, I enrolled in college at South Dakota State University and enrolled in the pre-architecture program and started down that role. And my plan was at that time to do pre-architecture because SDSU did not offer a full architecture degree at that time. So I was going to go 2 years there and then transfer. Well, then I decided to switch to civil engineering. And then at the end of my junior year, it was actually finals week where
Okay.
I got the internship with Mortensen Construction to, come and be an intern on a project still in South Dakota. So I jumped at that chance of being an intern on, and it was building B-1B support facilities on Ellsworth Air Force Base in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Okay. Awesome. So, I mean, at this time, are you kind of feeling like, wow, this is a dream job? This opportunity to become an intern at Mortensen. I mean,
Yeah,
absolutely. That's awesome. That's awesome having that opportunity to do that.
yeah,
I'm going to fast forward a few years. With Mortensen, you became a full-time employee. You're working for Mortensen, and you had the opportunity to travel.
yes, quite a bit.
You leaving South Dakota, where was your first stint?
From South Dakota, I went to Denver, Colorado,
Okay.
and was a project scheduler on a hotel in Denver.
Okay, nice. Had you been to Denver or
I had been to Denver once before.
okay. Yeah. How was that experience of actually being in a different state and living in a different state?
While it was from the humble beginnings of living in a small town or around a small town of 250, and then moving to the city of Denver, it was a culture shock. One of the hardest parts was driving on freeways, something I had not had any experience with. All of a sudden you have 4 lanes of traffic when the most you've seen prior to that is 2 when you're driving. And so
Yeah, you're like, what is
it,
this?
it was a culture shock.
Were you ever in your mind saying like, what am I doing? Or
Oh
I
yeah,
don't want to
yes.
be here and change your mind, want to just go back? And how did you feel or what were some of the emotions?
No, I think I was more excited to stay there and learn the new things. I mean, there was a ton of stuff that was going on there. I mean, we moved to Denver. I'm trying to remember the year, well, I do remember the year. It was 87, late in 87, because my son was born in Denver in 88.
Okay.
So we're moving to a new city, hadn't been married very long. Well, and then, so we had a toddler and we were expecting a baby and in a new city, throw all those great things together.
Yeah. So a lot of change.
Yes.
Yeah, a
Yes.
lot of change. I'm gonna fast forward again because you've been around with Mortensen, which is awesome. But can you tell me some of the other states that you had the opportunity to work out of, or some of the
Yeah.
projects that you worked on?
Well, from moving to Denver the first time working on a hotel project, took another big jump into a culture shock and moved to Los Angeles and worked on the Los Angeles Convention Center. So I was
Okay.
in Southern California, going downtown LA for 3 years, where every day we were right in downtown LA. I don't know if you remember this because you're about the age of my kids, so you would have been really little, but I've heard of the Rodney King riots
Oh yeah.
that
Yes.
happened in LA.
Yeah.
That was right down by our project site.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that was an interesting thing getting
Yes.
out of LA during those riots.
Oh yeah.
So spent 3 years in LA
Okay.
and then transferred back to Denver to work on Coors Field.
Oh yeah.
So was on the Coors Field project,
Nice.
building that stadium, was schedule manager there. And then they came to me and asked me to go on another project back in Southern California,
Okay.
which I really didn't want to go. But there were a lot of things that came into play there, and we ended up moving back to Southern California to work on a new water treatment plant.
Okay.
Then from Southern California, moved to Minnesota in 96 and was in the role of managing schedules for all of our heavy industrial group projects, which I was working on, several water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, et cetera,
Okay.
all over the country. So we had projects, literally from California to Georgia that I would be working on, either working on them from Minneapolis or, flying out to those projects. And then we had a project in Massachusetts that I basically commuted to for a year. So I flew back and forth every week from Minneapolis to Massachusetts until my kids got out of school for the summer. And we said, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to move to Massachusetts, at
Wow.
least for the summer. So we left our house and all our furniture and everything here set up and just moved to Massachusetts for the summer. So that was a cool experience.
Out of your travels, do you have a place that you feel is your second home? I know Minnesota, North Dakota, your first home, but
Well, it's interesting you say that because there are positive and negative aspects of every place I've lived. And obviously I've been in Minnesota longer than I've been anywhere else.
mm-hmm.
So this is pretty much home, but there are great things. I mean, things I miss about California is where I lived in California, I could be up in the mountains skiing in an hour and a half on one day, and the next day I could go an hour in the different direction and be on the beach.
Yeah.
So
See,
I
yeah.
missed that aspect
Yeah, absolutely.
and met great friends everywhere I lived. Colorado has always got a little piece of my heart just for the skiing and the culture.
I haven't been to Southern California, but Denver a handful of times and absolutely love it. Love the people, love the city, just everything about it. So throughout all this moving around and busyness, how is your health and well-being? I mean, were you exercising? Were you
When I was traveling around, moving around and living in different cities and states, I really didn't do too much of the exercising other than what you would typically do, raising kids,
which is a lot, yeah. Okay.
stuff like that. And then when we moved to Minnesota, lived in Minnesota for a couple of years, and the way I got back into running, it was kind of interesting. I was pretty much a slug, didn't do a lot of exercising, not eating healthy. I was a smoker. So I quit smoking, and then there was a group of runners at Mortensen that were going to run in this race called the Edmund Fitzgerald Ultra Marathon up in
Okay.
Duluth. And this friend of mine, coworker, was part of that running club, and he couldn't make it to this race that year. So I told people, they're like, well, why don't you ask Joe? He used to be a runner. And they all laughed because they didn't know me as that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. And so it was, I'll do that. I'll run a 10K. That's no big deal.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I couldn't keep up with my kids anymore. So I wanted to get healthy, and that just basically lit the fire under me to start running again.
I know you being a marathon runner. I don't know how many marathons you ran or how far you have run, but how many marathons have you run?
I ran actual marathons. I ran 3. So I ran Twin Cities twice and Grandma's Marathon once. But I have run, so like the Edmund Fitzgerald Ultra Marathon, that is 100K, but it was split up into a couple of 20Ks, a 25K, and 10Ks and 5Ks.
Okay.
So the first year I ran it, I ran a 10K, and after that it was always a 20K or a 25K.
Wow.
For half marathons, I lost count because there was one year I tried to do a half marathon every month.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
But one of my favorite running experiences, though, is I went for a run one day, and I live in Prior Lake. And so it's pretty easy to get to a rural area. So I like to run, out in the country. So I went for a run one day, and I could take out a lot of my aggressions, if you will, or stresses, etc. So running would help me with that.
Okay.
So I was running around and in my thoughts, and all of a sudden realized I didn't know where I was. So it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to turn around and try and backtrack. And I'd been gone for a long time, and my kids were probably preteen, maybe just starting to be teenagers, and they had called their mom at work, and they're like, Dad's been gone a really long time. I think we're worried about him. So anyway, I finally turn around, run, and I come back home, and I don't know how long I'd been gone, but I went and showered and then went and got my pickup and measured, backtracked what I had run, and I ran 38 miles that day.
38? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm like driving 38 miles is a drag. Like running. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is insane. That's insane. You started off by saying running to deal with your emotions, cope with what's going on, like a stress relief. Is that what running did for you? Is that how you found your motivation? Just Some people talk, some people work out. Was that your thing?
Yes, running was my thing. Yes.
Awesome. And that's what it's all about, trying to find things that we can do, positive things that we can do, and not those negative things.
Yeah.
You're working at Mortensen, you're running, things are going well in life, and everything comes to a halt. You get into a car accident.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your story on that? Have you and your home experienced storms that brought hail or heavy winds? Do you know what damage may exist to your home's exterior? Or maybe you are looking to upgrade your home's appearance and functionality with new siding or windows. Well, look no further than Preferred Contracting and Construction in Woodbury, Minnesota for your start-to-finish solution. Transform your house into the home of your dreams with an expert team of contractors. From roofs, siding, windows, and gutters to decks and patios, Preferred Contracting and Construction has you covered. Preferred Contracting and Construction replaced my roof, and it looks fantastic. Their attention to details and professionalism exceeded my expectations, and I couldn't be happier with the results. Experience the difference for yourself and trust the experts at Preferred Contracting and Construction to bring your vision to life. Contact Jake or Heather today for a consultation at 651-207-8266 or visit them online at mnpcc.com. That is mnpcc.com.
Well, it was November 24th, 2002, and friends of ours in South Dakota were beef farmers. And every year we bought a half a beef from them. So I went back to South Dakota to pick up our half a beef, and it was on a weekend. And I had let my parents know that I was coming and I was going to pick up this beef. And I told them I might be staying at your house, I might not. I might be staying with these friends where I'm picking up the beef. And so they were kind of expecting me, kind of not, didn't know for sure. So I'd gone to their house and picked up the beef, and I had decided to go back to my parents' house. And it was in November. It wasn't snowing, but it was cold and sleety and rainy. And I flipped my pickup end over end, less than a mile from my parents' house. So as near as we can tell, they think I was laying in the ditch in the cold for 4 hours before I was found. And it was interesting that the gentleman that found me was remodeling the farmhouse down the road from my parents. He didn't live there, but he couldn't sleep that night. So he decided to work on his house, and that's who found me.
Wow.
So my core body temp was 82 degrees. And so I was taken to the local hospital, and then I was airlifted to North Memorial in Minneapolis.
Wow.
So that was the start of the journey.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I knew the full details of it. And wow. You stating about the guy who found you, I'm a big guy who believe in God and fate.
Yeah.
And
well, there's a sad part of this story as well, though, that the guy, as I said, was remodeling the farmhouse down the road at the next farmhouse. So it was maybe 3/4 of a mile from my parents' house. And while I was still in the hospital, so I was injured in November, and this was, I think, in January. I'm not exactly sure, but I was still in the hospital. And my parents' house, the side that faced the farmhouse down the road, was where our dining room and kitchen were, and the living room was on the other side of the house. So my parents had been in their living room watching a movie or whatever, and my mom got up and went into the kitchen and said to Dad, "Oh my God, the neighbor's house is on fire."
Oh no.
And they went tearing down there, and this guy had bought the house and was remodeling it and planning on getting married, and his fiance left him. So he wrote a suicide note, left it in his pickup, locked himself in the house, and burned the house down.
Oh my gosh.
So my dad had tried to get in the house and couldn't because everything was locked up.
Everything was locked.
So I never got to meet him or thank him.
Oh my
gosh. Which is
yeah,
really sad. And it's sad to know. I mean, obviously, you talk about adversity, and how we dealt with it. So,
Mm-hmm.
I wish he could have taken, the positive thing that he did for me,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know the whole situation.
Exactly. No, you don't. You don't. Wow. I mean, he was in that position for a reason, though, to find you, Joe, and for whatever his journey was or mission was, that was part of it, is finding you. But wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So after your accident, I mean, you're in the hospital. I'm sure fear and
Yeah.
anxiety and just don't know really what's going on.
Yeah.
Like mentally, where were you? Like what's going on in your brain at this point?
Well, I was in a drug-induced coma for a month. So I don't really remember much of anything from November until Christmas.
Okay.
So that's all pretty much a blur for me.
Okay.
I had adult respiratory distress syndrome. I had a cold when I got in the accident, and I'm sure laying in the cold for 4 hours
Yeah.
didn't help that. So I had a lot of issues with that. So I was, as I said, trached and vented, and I was afraid to go to sleep because I didn't think I'd wake up again. So that terrified me.
Yeah.
And I also remember thinking, what kind of husband and father can I be now in this position? That really weighed on me heavily.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how is this going to dramatically change our family? So that was really tough in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And the other strange thing was being on the vent.
Yeah.
You don't even,
Yeah.
it's hard to put into words that, number one, I was paralyzed basically from the nipple line down. And then, so I have no control over my body. And now I don't even have control over my breath. So I can't even control when I take a breath because the machine is doing it for me. So I hated the vent. And there were many times I could manipulate myself to get it pulled off,
Mm-hmm.
which of course was a stupid thing to do because it was keeping me alive. So, but it was like, damn it, I don't want this thing on me.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. I mean, you saying that about what kind of husband or what kind of father am I going to be now or can I be? I mean, those thoughts had to be just gut wrenching and just so hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Going through this, what kept you strong? Like, what was your motivation? Like, the other side of the coin, where was I'm going to push through? Where did you find that?
For my kids, I wanted to be with my kids. I wanted to be with my family.
Yeah.
I wanted to see my kids grow up. And I think that was my main motivation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, that motivation wasn't always there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a lot of time in the hospital where I flat. You'd probably have to talk to my ex-wife and my kids. Be better at this where, I just shut down where they would come and see me and I would just lay there and not respond. Even after I got home from the hospital, there were days that, I just laid in bed and I didn't have that motivation. So it's a process. It took quite a while.
And and that's exactly why I'm doing this podcast, and it's not all smiles and gimmicks and jokes about, adversity, just go out and everything's great. No, we all deal with stuff, different magnitude, this being a very traumatic event. And that's how it is. There's the depths of those low feelings and those days that you just don't have it or you want to give up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so overwhelming, and that's exactly what I want to highlight in this podcast, because you've gone through it and I know you still have ups and downs, but you're here. Just from what I know about you and the experiences that we have shared together, you're always cracking jokes, you're smiling, you're telling it how it is, and you're just such a fun person to be around. And creating this podcast, I thought of that, and when I started thinking of you, I knew your story, but I didn't know it to this extent. But hearing some of the things that you've gone through, how in the world can you smile? Can you laugh? Can you crack jokes? Can you be Joe Dailey? and that's something that I just feel like is so special about you. And again, I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, one word when I'm writing about this episode, one word that kept coming to me was resilience, because I think of you when I first met you back in the ABLE program and where you were and your motivation to keep going and to do everything that you possibly could to increase your strength, your standing, your flexibility, just everything.
Yeah.
And then there's a pool of people, which, we all are on our journey where we are, and that's fine. But then there's a pool of people who just completely give up and they're just not there. And that's one thing that I commend you for. But again, I ask, was it your, how you grew up? Was it the experiences? Was it your running and that motivation to keep pushing yourself?
How you grew up.
Yeah. Was it the no?
How you grew up. That's a key thing right there.
Was it the no running water when you move? Was that it?
No.
I just.
It's interesting. You know what? I was talking to my financial advisor today, and going over a number of different things. And one of the things that we were talking about, I'll make a long story short in that I don't even know how to make it short, but let's just say that there was discussion about my sons and what they do for a living. And because we need to get a conference call with my advisor and both of my sons and me to talk about, what happens when I'm no longer here, and to make sure beneficiaries are in place. My kids know what I want to do with money, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a team of two of them. And she said, so we need to figure out a time when your schedules will mesh. And I kind of chuckled. And she said, well, I know one of your sons is a firefighter. And I said, no, he's a paramedic. And he works 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I'm like, so he's kind of backwards. She's like, okay, well, what about your other son? And I said, well, he's a production manager and he works 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I said, she's like, really, it works that long? And I'm like, I don't know exactly what time he starts, but I know he has days where it's way more than 8 hours and, just based on the stats. And she said, well, where did they get that work ethic? And I said, well, I blame my parents. That's where it started, if not before.
There you go.
So, for example, when we finished eating a meal, like when we got done with supper at night, we had to say, please may I be excused. My dad would say, what are you doing after this?
Okay.
I'd be like, what are you doing? What's your plan when you're done with supper?
Yeah.
And you could say, like, I'm going to go outside. You're going to go outside and do what? So we had to have a plan of what we were going to do. And the other thing was we could not use the word can't. It's like, I can't do that. And oftentimes if we said, I can't, we would have to come up with 2 reasons of why we can. And my mom used to say, can't died when grandma was born, which means you can't use the word can't because it died. So that was part of the motivation.
I like that.
The other part of it was my dad was a very critical person.
Okay.
And he would criticize of, you'll never be able to do this. And I don't know where it came from, but my personality was, if he told me I couldn't do something, I'm going to show him how I can.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting story in that regard of after my injury, and as you know, you're going through this trauma and relearning how to do things. And I remember when I was finally able to put my shoes on again by myself. And I was so proud of myself that I got myself dressed and I got my shoes on, and I was staying at my parents' house. And I'm like, hey, I'm so excited, and I'm like, you're like a little kid again and want to show your parents this cool thing I can do. So I'm like, watch this, and I put my shoes on and I was so proud.
Yeah.
And my dad looks at me and he goes, well, they're not tied. I wanted to punch him.
Yeah, you're like, oh, thank you, Dad.
I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Didn't you just see what it took for me to get the shoes on? And you were like,
exactly.
That's not good enough.
Oh my goodness.
But what's interesting is the next time I saw him, I tied my shoes.
Nice.
I'm like, look, Dad, they're tied.
Hey, there you go.
And I have not tied my shoes since. I'm like, I'm done.
Like, that's it.
They don't need to be tied.
Yep.
I'm not tying them anymore.
Yep. There you go. Oh, that's
yep,
awesome.
That box is checked.
Nice.
I'm done.
Yes, that's awesome. Joe, thank you for sharing that. It's just really deep stuff. And, it's things that a lot of people don't talk about. And again, like the podcast, Thank You Adversity. Of course, we highlight the adversities, but I really want to focus on the silver lining of those hardships and how we manage to push through those hard times and what we can do or things that helped for you or someone else. And people listening to the podcast, you never know what stage they are in, or they have gone through a traumatic event or stubbed their toe and having a bad day, whatever it is. What advice can you give to someone in a similar situation as you?
I think number one is attitude. What is your attitude? Life is what you make it.
Yeah.
So, you said to me, you seem always happy and always joking. And that's a choice. You need to choose to be happy.
Yes.
And if you're not choosing to be happy, then what are you choosing? And you talked about bad days and good days. And I don't necessarily look at it as bad days and good days. I have bad moments. I have, some bad things happen.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't drop so many things. Number one, and there's adversity every day of challenges with a disability.
Yeah.
And things that you're going to overcome. There's days where if people could hear me outside of my house and I'm screaming a number of expletives really loud and and everybody came in and I'd be, screaming whatever at the top of my lungs. But I've talked to other people in my same situation that do the same thing. So it's like, good, I'm not alone. Number one is attitude.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. You mentioned life is what you make it. And that's something I always say. We all have our stuff that we go through. We all have adversities, hardships, and it's attitude. I think you're so right on that. How we take it. We can be glum and just let it tear us apart and fall apart, or we can try to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and do what we can to make life what we want it. So I like that you said that. Thank you. One of the things I remember about, working with you is always playing Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum.
That's where I'm going to go when I die. Spirit in the Sky.
When I hear the song still today, I think of you, and I'm like, oh, Joe, I wonder what's he's up to. So I don't know. I just that association with.
If it's not at my memorial service or funeral or whatever, I will come back and haunt somebody.
Do you use music therapy or good days, bad days? Do you turn on music to help you feel better?
Where would we be without music?
Nice.
I have music on pretty much all the time when I'm home. I don't know that I've ever used it specifically for therapy, other than there are times when a song will come on just when you need it, and you'll hear lyrics. And and I don't remember now what this is crazy. I don't remember what the adversity was that caused this, but there's a song by Passenger. And I don't remember the title of the song, but in the lyrics it says, "You only know you've been high when you're feeling low." And that resonates with me because I believe it was when, I know I was in ABLE and everything is going great and things are well. And it was either I got a pressure sore or it was when insurance denied. So I'm in ABLE and things are going great and I'm improving and improving. And I was driving, and it was the first time I'd heard that song. It was relatively new. And it said, "Only miss the sun, only miss the road." And then it's like, you only know you've been high when you're feeling low. And it is like that. You don't realize how good things are until something knocks you down, and then you're like, holy crap, I need to cherish those highs
Yes.
a lot more.
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah, I'm good.
Only miss the road when you're driving home. Only miss the sun when it starts to snow. Only know you've been high when you're feeling low.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Nice. I like that. I like that. Thank you, Joe, so much for sharing your story. I mean, your story of adversity, of hardship, of going through such a traumatic event. You know, I just really thank you for being open and being honest, but sharing the things that help you, seeing the silver lining through those adversities and sharing what has helped you and how do you maintain and how do you push forward and your fight, you're doing it, for your sons and your family and wanting to stay positive and attitude and life is what you make it. I definitely see that in you and have seen that in you throughout the time of knowing you. And I feel like we share similarities in that nature. But there's so many people out there who don't have those tools in their toolbox. And when hearing it from someone like you, who have experienced these hardships and living through these tough times and still staying positive and staying motivated to be the best for yourself and be the best you. I think that's the biggest thing that I want to come from this podcast is people at all walks of life to hear this, get inspired, get motivated, and feel that they can still live their life and still make great changes and see the cup half full rather half empty. And I just thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much, Joe.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely.